Hello. It's me. I'm over here. I could be over here, but I'm over here. I guess I'll stick with this webcam for today. My name is Mike Bifulco. I am the director of technology for Aquint Gymnasium. You will find us online at thegymnasium.com any day of the year, any time of the day, 365, 24/7. We offer completely free websites on design and development of technologies for the web. You should definitely come and check them out. They are phenomenal courses taught by some pretty incredible instructors. I think I'm going to start by talking about a course I am particularly excited about every week. This week, the course that I'm excited about is our Sketch course. If you've never used the Sketch tool for Mac, it is an Illustrator-like design tool that goes well beyond what Illustrator was ever designed to do. It's designed for developers to work more closely with designers. It can generate images in vector format. It can work with other vector formats. Oh, hello, there's some piano in this song. It works with vector formats. You can export CSS. There is a plugin library, so you can include plugins that do things like generate content and like personas, pictures, names, lorem ipsum, that kind of stuff. It is very good. It is very fast. It's lightweight, and I use it for just about everything that isn't me writing code, up to and including building this please stand by picture that I put up every week, which I know you love. Was cobbled together from a couple of different things in Sketch. So that's a course I'm excited about this week. Come back next week. Ooh, you see what I did there? To see what I'm excited about in the coming weeks. Okay. Wow, no. Nature Time-Lapse 3 theme is what we're listening to right now. I just want flamingos. That's what I want. Ooh, binaural nature sound is coming up. You're gonna like it. You're not gonna like all of these though. I wonder if I can. Man, it's really hard to find music that you can stream as background noise on Twitch. That's okay. That's how the law works. We obey the law around here. Okay, here we go. What are we working on this week? Well, first let me turn on Do Not Disturb, which seems like a good idea as always, lest all my notifications for my various reminders and things come up and harass us all. This week I have a couple of things in mind that I wanted to work on, but I think the one I'm going to start with is potentially playing around with building something out that would end up being like a microservice for something that we'll be using on Gymnasium. I have a few different ideas for how we might do this, but I wanted to try my hand at a couple of different things. So how best can I explain this? We have on gymnasium.com, on certain parts of the site, like our course catalog here at /courses, we have some job listings, a la these. They are most good. They are jobs for your area. You can pick lots of different regions that we serve, see lots of different jobs. They work pretty well. In the near future, we're going to be including these job listings on different parts of the site with different goals in mind. So on this page, we're pretty generic about which jobs we include. Find the work that best fits your skills in your area. Well, as Gymnasium gets smarter and as we have a better understanding of what your skills are, what your skill set is, or what types of jobs you're looking for, we might want to get a little smarter with this API. The fact of the matter is that the API that we use to pull these jobs in comes from it's a predefined API that we already have, but we might want to collect some more information on it or provide more, so like usage information we might want to collect. We might also want to provide more parameters to it or more feedback to the API in the future. So I thought I would write essentially a wrapper that communicates with that API and generates web content in a way that is functional for us and has some reporting niceness added into it and whatnot. This is also more or less just another excuse for me to play around with one of my favorite tools in the world, which is Node, and to write some JavaScript functional code, to work on this stuff. And now that I'm explaining this, I'm wondering how much of this I can show on stream, because the API we're using it's locked down. Yeah, I guess we can do this. I may change my mind halfway through, we'll see. We can at least get part of this done. So all that being said, let me pull up. Man, I'm getting some strange tracks today. That's fine. Let me. I'm gonna pull up my code editor here, which has my OpenEdX code in it. I've zoomed in a bit already. If that's not enough, please drop me a line in the chat, which I'll try and monitor and do my best to zoom as is apropos for your needs. So, here's what I want to do. This is what I would like to accomplish. Ideally, on any given page, what I want to do is include a block that jams in some of these job listings based on your preferences supplied, profile information supplied. That may end up being your locale. It may end up being something like I'm an illustrator, I'm a copywriter, I'm a graphic designer, I am a front-end developer, specialist, whatever it is. We want to provide those sorts of things. So there are a couple of different ways that I might do this. A few different approaches, I guess. What I'm thinking is building a web API that sends back lightly formatted HTML to Gymnasium that we can use styles on. That essentially will be, it can either be served in an iframe or sort of as standalone, as long as they are properly sanitized, which may be a bit of a challenge. The other way to do it would be to write a standalone Python application that sits next to Gymnasium and serves up jobs from the same API, just in a different way where they would come server-side, essentially. The server-side method could work just as well as the sort of the more front-endy microservices way that I was talking about. And we may indeed explore both of those, but at least to start out, I figured we would poke around with this in just JavaScript alone. So, you may ask yourself, if I was doing something like this, how would I do it? Well, there's a lot of different ways to approach dealing with an API. Typically, what you're supplied with on API documentation is a sample call, or the parameters that an API endpoint takes in, or some general guidelines like what sort of querying they support, so that you can cobble together your own query for an API. In the case of something like this, sometimes I actually take sort of a two-layered approach where I would build something like a code sandbox or a JS bin to a code sandbox or a JS bin to deal with that. Come on now. We're gonna get better than this, I promise. Hang on. There we go. You don't know the secret things to search for to not get garbage music back, apparently. All right. Who was I, anyway? Right, JS bin. Okay, so at times I start with the JS bin and I work from there, making sure that I get my API calls correct. But a lot of the time when you're doing that sort of work, you run into cross-origin scripting request problems, or problems with JS bin kind of locking down the API that they make available. It gets a little tricky. You can also do things like set up a proxy service that will send those API calls. Some of the problems you start to run into is like that sentence in itself is fairly complicated. Setting up a proxy service just to be able to test an API call is stupid and annoying. It's certainly not something that a maybe more junior developer, more junior experienced someone could do comfortably, or maybe without following some documentation and not really knowing what they're doing. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of split on the best way to do this. There's a lot of comfort I have with things that are more intermediate to advanced level topics that might not be good for someone following along on this stream. So, as I'm doing this, maybe if I jump to some conclusions or do things that are beyond the understanding of the general audience on the stream, I'm happy to answer questions, or we can take a step back, or we can switch the goal, whatever it may be. So let's get started with some code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a folder to this, which is largely where we're going to work out of today. We're going to call this jobs module. And this is essentially going to be a separate project, but I'm just leaving it in this same in the folder structure that I use here. Doesn't really hurt anything having it here. I'll probably move it after the stream is done, but for the sake of this, it's easier to do. So, oops, in a terminal window, in a separate terminal window, I'm going to do a node init. No, that's not what I wanted. npm init. Actually, yarn init. We're just going to create a quick npm package descriptor here. Jobs module for gymnasium. This is the go-between for the job API we use and the job listings display. So the purpose of this project is essentially to be a translator. In the case that maybe we change which API we're using, or we use different APIs for different purposes, or we have multiple API sources, this would kind of be the funnel for them eventually. At least to start with, it'll be the very customizable place that I have to work with. Repo URL we're going to leave blank. I'll put myself as the author. MIT license is fine. Private. No, it's open source. That's fine. Okay, so that should give me a yarn start. It'll run an app that doesn't exist because I don't have any commands in there, but we can change that. So scripts start node. Ooh, wow, home row node. So all I'm doing is defining a script that will run when I do this, which is good. It's complaining because, of course, I don't have an index defined. So now if I do yarn start, it'll run nothing because there's nothing in that file, but as you can see, it's hooked up to that code. So it's raining all of a sudden. Hopefully that made some sense. I'm going to add a couple of packages to this that I will probably end up using with the yarn add command. Just for testing, always good. That's a test library. We'll have to set that up. Wait a second. Oh, and actually, while we're at it, something new I want to try. Sorry, a couple more things first. Lodash, ESLint. That's a development thing. So Lodash we'll use to deal with some of the callbacks we get from the API to format the JSON as we see fit and to do filtering and whatever. I'm going to do ESLint, and we'll configure that ESLint pretty shortly. Okay. I'm going to try prettier, which I haven't actually used before, so maybe we'll do that here. Prettier is a partner library tool for I guess it's a toolchain nicety that goes alongside ESLint and similar to make your code a little nicer. So it's an opinionated code formatter, which sounds pretty nice to me. We're going to talk about how it works. I've never actually set it up before, so let's do this. Yarn add prettier dev exact. Did I add it as a dev dependency? Let's see. No, I did not. Well, we can fix that. I'm not sure what that exact does. That might just make that, yeah, okay, it took away the specificity of that. Okay, that was easy. Run prettier through the CLI with this script. Run it without any arguments to see the options. Your plugins in beta. Okay, let's look at configuring it. Well, actually, let's just start with prettier. Oops. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so that's where it lives. I didn't install it globally, so the command won't be available globally, but it should work from here. I'm betting there's an init command in here somewhere. Let's run this again. Okay, one more time, sorry. So if this is like ESLint, which I had been using previously, there should be config files available for common config things. ESLint is what I typically use. Let's see how this works. Oh, nice. To do all of your style checkings with a single command execution, you can ask ESLint to run prettier for you. Disable conflicting rules. Okay. We'll get there. So let's see how this works. In theory, if I have something like in this, I don't think prettier will like that for a number of reasons. So let me put my command line on the right, my code on the left. We're going to run prettier, and we're going to point it to that file. Yeah, no? Did that not do it? Yeah, okay, well, I guess it depends how you have the config set up, but it automatically spaced out and fixed that. So watch on the left, I'm going to hit enter. And when oh, I didn't save. Sorry. When I hit enter, it should go and change it. That's cool. Okay. So there's also a prettier config for VS Code. Prettier. Let's see. So that'll work. I think you can even set it up to run on save, which I tend to do often. Editor.format on save setting. So we're going to do format on save, and We're going to edit in this workspace. True. Okay. So now in theory, if I do this and I save, it formatted it for me. How lovely is that? That's great. So I can write all the garbage JavaScript code I want, and Prettier will come back and at least clean up the formatting. Maybe not all the lint issues, because that's a different purpose. So that's Prettier did. Let's set up lint now. So first we've got to configure this. With the, oh boy, the init command. We're going to answer some questions. Am I using ECMAScript 6 features? I probably will. ES6 modules might. Code will run in the browser. Do you use CommonJS? No. Do you use JSX? Maybe. I'm going to say yes. Do you use React? If I use JSX, I'll use React. I prefer tabs. Wait, this is not what I wanted. Sorry, wrong one. Use a popular style guide. This will do all the answers for me. Do I use React? I'll say yes. JavaScript format, and it answers all the rest of the questions. Cool. The Airbnb config is one that is used pretty much everywhere, or pretty widely across JavaScriptery, and is very easy to set up. Okay. Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to have to be very careful about how I set this up. In fact, I might want to move this directory now, because that error is going to get annoying. Okay. So I think we're going to have to do a yarn install, because that probably added some dependencies. It did. Oh dear. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, hang on. While it's doing that, in the background, I'm going to open up a new window and point it at just that folder. Open folder. Source. Gymnasium. I got it. Okay, and actually there's a strong chance I'm going to need to move this folder eventually, but for now we'll just start level down. So this is now pointing to fine. That's an ugly name. Okay, so what I like to do is add a lint command in here. Actually, I'll keep these in alphabetical order for once. So that should run, if I run this, cool. Now I've got lint errors showing up. That's great. If I come in here, they may or may not show up. There we go. X is assigned a value but never used. Okay. That's very good too. Now I need to go back to Prettier and follow the instructions they were saying to integrate with ESLint. So I have to add the plugin for Prettier. And in my ESLint RC, I want this. We're going to add the config. Okay, I think that did it. So now if I run yarn lint, that will still show up. And actually, I don't think it'll be a problem because I have this set to run prettier on save. Uh-oh. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Because this is a different editor environment. Editor format on save, we're going to set this to true in the workspace. This is a new workspace, mind. So that will be in here. So now when I hit save, did that not work? Why? File must not be autosaved. The editor must not be shutting down. Okay. Okay. Weird. Having some strange VS Code issues. We're just going to get rid of that. How do you like me now? Got my icons back. Ah, there we go. Okay. It seemed like that was actually what was crashing everything else out. Okay, so now I'll run lint. I get my lint error, and I will never see the prettier errors because I have to save. Their lint only runs on the saved file, and prettier runs on save. That's pretty cool. So that's actually nice. That's really nice. Okay. That's basic project setup done. Kind of cool. Didn't take too long. Probably took a little longer with me talking through it and reading through the docs out loud than it would have in person. I would imagine there are also probably some, what do they call them, like canned projects that you can use that are just sort of starter projects. It's not too hard to set up yourself, and it's worth doing once or twice just to understand how these things work. So now we can get into the meat of this. I'm going to create a source folder, which is where most of my source code will live. And I think I'm going to try and build this as a... We might work with React a little bit here. We're going to try and stay with just JavaScript for a bit. Once it gets the HTML formatting side of things, we might work with some other stuff. So, okay, just to prove to you once again that this is working. This is working. Hit save, it put in a semicolon for me, and that is amazing. Okay, sorry, I'm excited. That actually works really nicely. Great, so it logged my thing. ESLint doesn't like console logs with the Airbnb rules, but I may actually disable that. Because we'll probably use consoles here, and this code will... actually, I'm going to have to... I've never seen prettier errors. There we go. We'll have to make some decisions about where this code runs and how it runs. I've got a couple of different approaches in mind, one of which would put this in the server where console logs don't matter. The other one, the console logs would kind of matter, and I definitely shouldn't have them in there once we get to production. So, yeah, okay, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to let it yell at me for console logs for now. We'll fix those later on. Okay, so let's get started here. So what I want to do is create a function that loads jobs based on some input parameters. So this is basically what I want to run. Something like this that will turn my request for jobs, load jobs, into an array that gets stuffed into this variable. So, whoa, look at that. that's going to take some getting used to. I just hit save and it formatted everything for me. I can actually run this from the terminal here. Well, if I go here and add a configuration, maybe. Uh-oh, feels like it's freezing. There we go. Okay, launch via npm. npm run script start. We're going to get rid of this one. VS Code definitely has the VS Code has the best node debugger that, for God's sakes, has the best node debugger of any IDE I've used. However, it is extremely finicky to get it set up sometimes, and frustratingly so. Let's see what happens this time. I put debug console, something like that. It's going to tell me it's not working. Okay. Let's try this one. Oh, actually, I forget what the default. So, here's my trick for this. I'm going to delete this launch JSON, move it to the trash. I'm going to go back to this runner, create a new config, start from the default node 1, launch program. And if that works, we'll stick to that. Oh, do we have no output so far? Yes. Okay. Yeah, okay, that worked. It may have been working before. It's going to yell at me for this. It's going to yell at me for this, for not being used. That's okay. This will take the form of several steps. We're going to break this up into a few different helper functions and things to make the code a little cleaner. And by the end, should have a handy little JavaScript package that we can use to load jobs from this API and translate them into something that we get along well with. So, okay, so our API accepts a few different things. Let me start a big comment up here. So we're going to say inputs locale. This will be either city name /ID. We'll have to make some decisions there. So it's going to be either this or lat and launch combination. If we feed in the latitude and longitude, it has to map to a city name. I've already written the logic for that elsewhere. We'll probably just reformat that for the purpose of this. We're going to say, so I'm going to use some of our lingo here, but minor segment, the specialization of a particular request. So the type of jobs to return for a given request. Oh, that is really annoying. Next, please. Page, the page number to return, page size, how many results per page, and that's probably a good place to start. I think it is. So we're going to take in a settings thing that will have these as options. Yeah, so we'll call that config. and I'm going to use this essentially to redefine what I've said above, but we'll add them one at a time as we start to support them. So, locale is going to be config.locale. Yeah, so this is going to be the input locale, or we're going to say latitude, what should I call that, coordinates, is going to have lat, is going to be config.lat, and on so this is kind of the shape of things that, the shape that I'm going to put these into to use them in this function call. So with the goal of formatting all these things together so that we can send an API call to an existing API with expectations of what comes into it. So one of the things I'm going to have to do is convert this latitude and longitude to a locale. So we're going to, inside of this source, I'm going to create a file called util. In util, I'm going to create a function called get locale from lat long equals. Okay, so this is, it's going to keep doing that when I save. What is the problem? Preferred default export. Sure, there's only one thing in here right now. Well, there will be more than one, so I'm not going to use the default export. We'll just export a second thing and it'll shut up. Export const locale list. This is going to return an ID given, well, a list of IDs. That doesn't even need to be a function. You know what? I'm using the wrong word for that. We're going to call that market instead of locale. There we go. Let me go and change that back in here. Up here, I'm going to say, oops, const markets equals require okay, let me open up another VS Code editor. I'm going to grab that list of markets from the Gymnasium code base and I'll drop it in here. Boy, you know what? That's going to end up being in its own file because it's big. How big is it? Bigger than that. Give me a second. Okay. Perfect. Okay. this is my list of markets from Gymnasium as it looked in there, although on Gymnasium currently I think it says var. That's fine. We are going to return this from this markets variable, like so. And so it's an array of objects. Each object has a name, an ID, coordinates, latitude, longitude, and there's a whole heap of them. We could put this into an external file, which might be nicer, but for now it can live here. I also wrote some of the logic to do this bit from a geolocation, which maybe I can source from Gymnasium as well. It's a relatively short function, actually, huh? Okay, yeah, we're going to do something slightly different here because this is going to get messy quick. So, constants will keep my list of markets because it is a constant. That's great. Util will have get locale from latitude and longitude. And to do that, we're going to need a couple of helper functions. So this is a return the Cartesian distance between 2 points, 2 GPS points. Not really GPS points. On the map, we're going to have to also we'll need the list of markets for this. We're going to need, oops, I can't use that. Let's see. Okay, I need these markets. That's all well and good. I'm also going to need low dash, so require both of those things. I'm going to say for each markets, and we're going to say market oops, I'm doing this in the wrong place. Okay, so we'll do this math in a second. In this locale thing, I want to run through each of the markets, and given a specific market, I'm going to say let nearest equal null. And then I'm going to do okay, if distance between points of You're seeing me make some pretty rapid fire decisions about what my own API is going to be like here. If I'm going too quickly, please stop me because I confuse myself sometimes too. Where's my dang code window? Ah, I've got two open. Okay. One is blocking the other on my second screen. So, in this function, I'm going to pass in a position. Given that position, I'm going to determine, this is called JSDoc. I figured how to do this. Object containing lat and long for which we will return the nearest locale. Just documenting what I'm doing here. Get locale nearest to the input position. So we're going to say position and market dot boards. So what we want to do is say if this is less than nearest, then nearest equals, let's do this calculation once. I hope you can hear this song. We're getting into some nature sounds from what appear to be Japanese authors. Interesting. So that's all this function needs to do, is return the nearest market given a bunch of input values for preferred default export. I know. Damn, this thing is a pain in the ass. Great. There was an infinity in JavaScript. Maybe not. There we go. Yes, great. So what we're doing here is we're looping through each of the market's input to find the one that is the nearest by distance, and then returning that at the end of this function. So now we need to write the function that actually calculates the Cartesian distance between the two, which I've already written on Gymnasium. I'm just going to grab that and we will adjust the code accordingly. So this is sort of what that looks like. Shorten some of these. Ooh. So you can see some of this was written in pre-ES6 JavaScript where let and const are not present. Get this out of here. I don't need that any longer. We can move this out of here even. Use the exponentiation operator instead. Restricted properties. That's interesting. I wonder why that is. We can look that up in a second. Okay, let's look at my constants and see what format these come in. They have latitude and longitude written out, which is fun. So I better make sure that latitude and longitude... No. Okay, let's get back into it. Sorry about that. Music is a perpetual distraction. Yeah, this should work. I need to make sure that we're spelling out latitude and longitude everywhere. So to do that, I'm going to spell them out here. Okay, yeah, we might make some decisions about how this works in a minute here, but for now, nice. Let's look at why ESLint doesn't like this. One of the nice things you can do with ESLint errors is actually go in and grab the error name and open up a browser tab and essentially search for that, and you'll get to the ESLint docs that describe why that's not recommended. So, certain properties on objects may be disallowed in a code base. This is useful for deprecating an API or restricting usage of a module's methods. For example, you may want to disallow using describe.only when using Mocha, or telling people to use object.assign instead of lodash.extend. Okay, math.pow restricted. Let's get to a reasonable explanation for why I shouldn't be using math.pow. Is math.pow in here? No. This keeps coming up though, that's interesting. Let's get a good... I often like to get to a good explanation for what's going on. Usually you can search for that in here. Okay. Well, the theory then is that I can use the exponent operator instead. So let's try that. I don't actually know how that works. We may have to look that up. Oops. Let's do that. JavaScript exponent operator. Exponentiation operator. Cool. This is an ES6 feature, which means it's relatively new. Yeah, okay, just like one would expect. So I'm just gonna add some parens around this to hopefully make it a little clearer what's going on. Nope, Prettier didn't like that. That's fine. Okay, so what this is doing is it's calculating the distance between these 2 points using Pythagorean theorem, essentially. So the distance to one side, the distance to the other side, the square root of the 2 squares gets you the distance. That should work. We can test this if you want. It's a latitude and longitude are effectively a Cartesian plane, or at least simplified into a Cartesian plane for the purposes of doing geolocation stuff. Of course, the reality is not quite that. What with the Earth being a sphere and there also being variations in elevation and all that. But this is an overly simplified and perfectly functional model for what we're doing here. The physicist in me wants to define those things for you. I apologize if that was overly pedantic. So, carrying on, now we have a nice little function that gets given an input position that has a latitude and a longitude defined. It will grab the distance between those 2 points and give me the longest one. Some of the smart math that's done here, right. So this was the complexity. They're on a 360-degree scale, meaning at the, the prime meridian or the international dateline, perhaps. At some point, there are 2 points adjacent to each other that are 0 and 360, or negative 180 and positive 180, depending how you look at it, depending on what reality actually is. And what this does is adjusts for that by putting it on a 0 to 360 scale. By adding 180 degrees, modding it by 360, we can simplify the distance into a linear coordinate plane that makes sense to us and is universal. So let's test this bad boy out. We have a list of markets somewhere in our constants file. What is it complaining about? Right. Okay, we're going to do export default, export const default market equals, oh man, I should have done this differently. We're just gonna do that for now. We'll use an ID, Boston 10, not 1. Great. Okay, now we have 2 exports in here. It will shut up. This is still complaining because we haven't done anything reasonable in here. I'm actually going to comment this out. I'm going to then test out the function that we just wrote by requiring that function, which was called get locale from latitude and longitude, using a destructuring trick, which is an ES6 thing, and requiring this util okay. In theory, what this will do is print out the nearest locale to 1, 1, which we can test with a quick zap of this. And we got an error. Unexpected token export. Right. Boy, JavaScript is confusing sometimes, huh? For default export, yes. Great. And I'm going to have the same problem in here. Boy. I forget how to do that. So, in a new tab, I've got this here. Declare multiple module.exports in node.js. Okay. So that should be something like well, there's only one output here still. But I think we can say module.exports equals get locale from lat long. Great. And now maybe it'll run. The syntax I was using was a syntax that's not yet approved. Hey, look at that. We got null back. Job done, y'all. There's a null-ass location near to 1 and 1. Okay, now we get to do some debugging to figure out what's going on. Okay, I'm going to start by putting in a debugger line here. And, ooh, Prettier doesn't like debugger? Come on, man. All right, I can do it this way. That was rude. How the hell are you supposed to get anything done around here? Okay. Oh, markets is undefined because... I see. We're just going to fix this. Great. Okay. Let's try that again. Markets. We got a whole list of markets. Hey, look at that. Paris. I got something back. Don't know if that's valid. Let's find my... latitude and longitude. So let's see what the internet has to offer. Great. We're going to test for these. This should, in theory, return Charlotte. And now if I run this, I should take that out. Hey, what do you know? It works. Okay, cool. So we've got a handy-dandy little nearest market calculator that we just wrote. That wasn't too bad. A couple little hiccups here and there. Whoa. Did that freeze for a second? That was cool. A few things I should explain that I just did sort of rapid fire. So when I went in and changed this from export default to module.exports, this syntax is valid in ES6. The syntax I was using before which was export const markets, right? Like that kind of stuff will be valid in the future. I forget the exact name for it, but it has something to do with the way that imports work in JavaScript, not yet being fully ratified, and they're working on that. So this works for now. Across the board, no matter what you're doing, if you're using something like Webpack or Babel to transpile your future ES6 into sort of currently working ES6 on the Node V8 engine, then you can use the export default syntax and this rather than this module.exports. Similarly, in the new world, this line would be import get locale from lat long from source util. So it'll look like that in the future, as opposed to what it currently looks like. Neither here nor there, they both work. It's all in what you get used to. You kind of need to know both in certain scenarios. Anywho, this is what we got. So we now have this latitude and longitude detector. That's handy. So in certain scenarios, my load jobs function that we're going to use, if it just has latitude and longitude and no market ID, then we'll use this get locale, set the market ID, and then use that to go get some jobs. So we can talk through how that works now. I'm going to uncomment all of this stuff. We're going to reconfigure some of it. In particular, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do a better definition of what this input config looks like. So input config market ID. Market ID is used if provided. Fallback is long. Used as fallback if market is not provided. And we're also going to have eventually a name in here. Human readable name of this market. Great. Minor segment. List of minor segments to search for. Page 1. I don't need to put comments within comments here, but this will be 0 results page to return, page 1, page size. Maybe we'll start with 10. The number of results per page. Great. Get rid of that. So here's how we're going to start. Step 1. We'll write some pseudocode here. Step 1, determine the location for which we are returning jobs. Job listings. If no market is provided and no lat long is provided, we will return listings for all markets. That's what I'm going to start with. Sue me if you don't like it. Step 2. Given a market, fire off API call for jobs of minor segment supplied. Step 3, return JSON object with job listings. Okay, so what this is shaping up to be is hopefully the microservice we were talking about before. We're going to do this a step at a time. So step 1, determine the location for the jobs. We're going to do if config.market.id else if config.market.latitude and config.market.longitude. We're also going to have to check for whether or not there's a market to begin with. Let target market equals config.market.id. I'm going to use the IDs because that's what our API uses. Equals get locale from lat longe for I should say this. Okay, lovely. So in theory, this all will determine our market based on the input parameters. This bit is the API call, so we're going to need a node module called fetch. I'll show you how that works in a bit. Oh, you know what? No, I won't. Well, okay. Now I need to start making decisions. Fetch only works server-side, which means that this code has to be executed in a node environment that doesn't have a browser in it, which is fine. We would just need to host this as a microservice somewhere, like AWS or Heroku or whatever you want. Yeah, I think that might be perfectly reasonable to do. So we're going to, did I remove it? No, we're going to leave fetch in there. And we'll work on hosting this on stream 2, which is always fun to do. Probably with Heroku, maybe with AWS, like a Lambda function or something like that. If that's the case, then I could have set this up with Babel transforms and all that. But I don't really think I need to, just to get nicer import syntax. Yeah, okay. So far, so good. So, boy, oh man, it's 2:47 already. Okay. Well, let's keep hooking this up. Let's for now, I'm just going to say return target market, which should be able to do this and plug this in here. And still get Charlotte out. Undefined. Oops. Oh, I see. This needs to be market. Let's run it again. Okay. I may do some reconfiguring of that API setup, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Goodness. So I'm trying to think whether or not, I've got about 10 minutes to get this done, but we could probably set up a small Express server to serve up this result as a web page, which will eventually be the result of the hosting on Heroku or Lambda or whatever it is. I don't know if that's a worthwhile task for right now. That does take a little bit, and there will definitely be stumbling through, because the amount of times I've set up an Express server does not correlate to the amount I've remembered about it. Yeah, man. Let's see. So this might actually end up being a good place to stop. There's going to be some fun to do with this bit where we actually do the API call, because we need to construct that API call fairly carefully, depending on which of the above is present, and then actually get back the information from that and format it and paginate it in a way that we want to deal with on Gymnasium. Yeah, okay, so maybe let's stop here. That was reasonably good progress. A lot of it was project setup, I suppose. And actually, so some of the nice things that we'll be able to do, let me drop this in here while I'm thinking about it. Format. So if I want to send back HTML, which I could do, I could accept a format parameter that gives me, there's a couple different job formats, like job listing formats, that we feed back on the site. Although they're pretty simplistic right now, I think they may actually all contain the same information. Let us take a look. So it's a title, it's a location. On here, the home page will freak out because my stream shows up at the top of it, but yeah, okay, they're fairly similar. For now, I'm not going to accept that format parameter, but that's something we may use in the future, is something that tells maybe if there's more information we want to show, like a longer form job listing, a detail page or something like that. We can do that from our API, or at least specify that that's the kind of markup we want to get. And then actually the other thing that we're going to end up adding to this is some API analytics stuff to show how often this is called, maybe log some information about the markets that are being used, or the amount of pages that we're going through for certain markets. That might be interesting to see. Numbers are cool like that. Yeah, okay, with that said, let's call it a day for the stream. I will be back next Tuesday, as always. You can find me here online in your face. We'll do more of this. Until then, if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at irreverentmike. I am... email is mbyfolco@aquuent.com. I'm on Twitch if you want to follow me there. And anything else you need, just track me down. I will catch you next week, everyone. Have a good afternoon.